On April 20, 1999, a tragic event known as the Columbine Massacre deeply shocked America. Two young men, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out a terrible school shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. They meticulously planned the attack and killed 12 students and one teacher, while injuring 24 others before ending their own lives. This event, like 9/11, had a profound impact on American culture and society, forever changing how we see things. Even 25 years later, we are still struggling with unanswered questions. Why did these two teenagers do such terrible things? How did we not see it coming? And most importantly, how can we heal and move forward from this deep tragedy? As we remember this sad anniversary, it's important that we address the root causes that lead to such pointless violence. Only by understanding and dealing with these underlying issues can we hope to stop similar tragedies in the future. Two ordinary teenagers. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were two ordinary white teenagers. Klebold, a Colorado native, was recognized for his reserved demeanor and intellect. His exceptional intelligence was evident early on, leading to his enrollment in the Colorado CHIPS, Challenging High Intellectual Potential Students, program for gifted students as early as 3rd grade. Conversely, Eric Harris, hailing from Wichita, Kansas, had a more transient upbringing due to his father's career as an Air Force pilot, resulting in frequent moves. Despite coming from stable family backgrounds, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were perceived as outsiders by some of their high school peers. This outsider status may have stemmed from the fact they were not particularly popular among the girls or known for having a dating history and their limited involvement in sports, an area highly esteemed at Columbine High School. The school's emphasis on athletic achievement was evident in its extensive trophy collection prominently showcased in the main hall, contributing to an intense jock culture where popular students, primarily athletes, received special treatment from both faculty and fellow students. In contrast to the sports-centric atmosphere, Harris and Klebold found their passion in the realm of the internet and online gaming. Harris, especially, was deeply engrossed in this world, dedicating himself to creating multiple levels for the game Doom, a notorious first-person shooter known for its graphic violence and gore. Online, Harris adopted the alias REB, a subtle reference to his school's sports team name, while Klebold operated under the pseudonym Vodka. They made fun of teachers and students who were computer illiterate and rolled their eyes of classmates' stupid questions. When Klebold wanted to put a nasty note in someone's locker, he hacked into the school's computer system to learn the combination. However, what's most striking is Harris's use of his websites for self-expression. Initially, he shared personal thoughts about family, friends, and school, but later he posted instructions on making explosives and expressed intense hatred towards those who bullied him and Klebold. Meanwhile, Klebold's journal entries revealed self-loathing, insecurity, and depression. Despite when these feelings arose, they ultimately led them to plan the tragic massacre at Columbine. Morbid Friendship. The friendship between Harris and Klebold took a disturbing turn in the months leading up to the 1999 rampage. They started experimenting with explosives and engaging in vandalism. At their workplace, Blackjack Pizza, they and their coworkers goofed around during slow hours, drinking beer and setting off bottle rockets from the roof. They also spent time making ice-dry bombs using instructions found on the internet. During this time, their behavior became increasingly bold and eccentric. Harris took the lead, and Klebold followed. One night, their friend Brown was startled awake at 3 a.m. to find Harris and Klebold dressed in black, tapping at his window. They explained they were on missions, toilet papering houses, spray painting graffiti, and setting fire to potted plants. These acts were sometimes done for fun, sometimes as retaliation for perceived slights at school. Harris began pushing people away. Unable to drive, he relied on Brown for rides to school. Constant tardiness from Brown led to arguments. Eventually, Brown refused to give him any more rides. This led to a confrontation where Harris retaliated by smashing Brown's windshield with a block of ice. Furious, Brown informed both sets of parents about Harris's behavior. In January, Klebold gave Brown a piece of paper with a web address written on it, urging him to visit the site that night without informing Harris. The website revealed Harris's AOL profile, where he wrote under the alias Reb or Reb Doomer, detailing his escapades with Klebold and expressing desires to harm people, including Brown. Brown's parents contacted the police upon learning of the threats. This resulted in a formal report being filed. Despite this, Harris and Klebold managed to evade serious consequences when they were arrested for breaking into a van and stealing electronics. Harris's father facilitated their entry into a juvenile diversion program, where Harris excelled as a model participant, maintaining straight A grades and attending counseling sessions. However, the embarrassment of being caught fueled a hidden rage within both Harris and Klebold. Subsequently, Harris began documenting his thoughts and plans in a journal, which revealed his resentment and superiority complex. Together, they continued to build pipe bombs, eventually culminating in the planning of Judgment Day or NBK, referencing the film Natural Born Killers as a code name for their intended massacre. Growing rage. The journals of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold give us a disturbing look into their plans for Judgment Day and their troubled thoughts. It all started in early 1998 when Harris stopped posting online and began writing in a notebook called The Book of God. In it, he wrote about violent fantasies and his belief that life was meaningless. Meanwhile, Klebold had been writing in his own diary called Existences, a virtual book, since the previous spring. Klebold's writing was sad and poetic, talking about God, drinking alcohol, hurting himself, and thinking a lot about death. He often wrote about love, including letters to a girl he liked but never sent. He felt like he had ruined his life and that nobody understood him. On the other hand, Harris's journal was more focused. He thought people were like robots, just following society's rules blindly. He believed he was smarter than everyone else and wanted to see who would survive in a hypothetical test like a video game. He admired Nazis and believed in getting rid of people he saw as weak. Their troubling behavior started to show in real life too, like in July 1998 when they got into a scary situation with another student at a store. The student saw one of them with a gun, and things got tense later at a fireworks stand, though nothing more violent happened. As time went on, Harris and Klebold became increasingly open about their frustrations. They became interested in filmmaking, especially Dylan, who was active in the theater department. Both boys joined the audio/visual class, which allowed them to use recording equipment and the school's Rebel News Network, RNN, broadcasting station. This gave them a way to express themselves creatively and also potentially channel their darker thoughts and ideas. The last months before the massacre. For a year before the Columbine shooting, Eric Harris spent his time making dozens of explosives like pipe bombs and CO2 canister crickets. He even looked into making napalm and tried to recruit a friend named Chris Morris into his plans, passing it off as a joke when Morris turned him down. Harris took detailed notes on how students moved around the school and counted the number of exits. At the same time, he studied gun laws, including the Brady Bill, and looked for ways to exploit loopholes in these laws. Then, on November 22, 1998, Eric and Dylan purchased 3 guns, a high .9mm carbine rifle and 2 shotguns, at a gun show. They needed an adult to make the purchase, so they convinced their 18-year-old friend Robin Anderson to help them out, who later became Klebold's prom date. Even though Eric and Dylan were both 17 and could legally buy guns from an unlicensed dealer at a gun show, they felt it was safer with Robin. Robin thought they might use the guns for hunting or collecting, but she wasn't entirely sure. To her, Eric and Dylan were just cool guys to hang out with. They gave her the money, she showed her driver's license to the seller, and they successfully bought the gun. About a month later, Eric and Dylan attended another gun show where they met up with their friend Philip Duran and his friend, Mark Manies. Philip knew they were looking for another gun, so he introduced them to Mark, who owned a TC-DC-9 semi-automatic pistol. They paid Mark $500 for the pistol. After their first gun purchase, Harris believed they had passed a critical point with no way back. However, unexpected issues arose when the local gun shop called his house just before New Year's to inform him that the high-capacity magazines he had ordered for his rifle had arrived. When his father answered the phone, Harris had to quickly dismiss it as a wrong number to avoid suspicion. During this time, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold created a short film called Hitmen for Hire. In this video, they portrayed themselves as hitmen for hire who offered revenge services against bullies. They presented a vision where bullied individuals, such as geeks, outcasts, and nerds, could turn to them to confront their antagonists. The film depicted Dylan and Eric dressed in black trench coats and stylish sunglasses, eliminating the bad guys, the bullies. The video had echoes of Pulp Fiction, but with hindsight, it's unsettling to watch given the tragic events that unfolded on April 20, 1999, especially since it was filmed at Columbine High School. When Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold shared their movie with their class, it left everyone horrified. The film depicted them being hired by a nerd to confront a bully, ultimately shooting the bully with fake guns. Surprisingly, both the Harris and Klebold families, along with the police, only discovered the existence of this film after the tragic massacre occurred. The teacher reportedly scolded them for the violence portrayed in the film but did not recognize it as a potential threat at the time. This amateur film is part of what is known as the basement tapes, a collection of videos shot in the Harris family basement. These tapes, totaling roughly 4 hours in length, were recorded by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold in the final weeks of their lives. They offer disturbing glimpses into the methods and motives behind the tragic attack that took place at Columbine High School. In February 1999, Klebold wrote a short story for his English class that centered around an angry man in black systematically targeting preps. The story concluded by exploring the impact of the murder on those left behind. The subject matter and strong language used in the story unsettled his teacher, Judy Kelly, to such an extent that she felt unable to grade it until she had discussed it with Klebold and his parents. Judy Kelly had a conversation with Klebold, during which he explained that the story was merely fictional. Subsequently, Kelly reached out to Klebold's parents, who acknowledged the challenges of understanding their child's perspective. Kelly then sought guidance from the school counselor, who received a similar explanation from Klebold. Later, on March 25, 1999, the entire Klebold family, Dylan, his brother Byron Klebold, and their parents, traveled to Tucson to visit the University of Arizona. They paid a deposit for what was supposed to be Dylan's dorm room, as he was set to attend college graduating in April. His family noted that Dylan appeared genuinely excited about starting college. Moving forward to April 2, 1999, Eric Harris spoke with Staff Sergeant Mark Gonzalez about potentially joining the Marines. Harris expressed his interest in the Marine Corps, sharing personal details and indicating that he had never used drugs. Following this initial conversation, Eric was scheduled for further interviews and testing. Troubles emerged on April 8, 1999, when custodian Jay Galantini arrived at Columbine High School before 5 a.m. and discovered that all door locks were glued shut. He heard unusual noises and footsteps on the roof, prompting him to contact the police and begin replacing the locks. Subsequent inspections revealed the word seniors spelled out in duct tape on a large glass skylight. Later that day, security camera footage showed 2 unidentified suspects in dark clothing on the school's premises. As the days passed, preparations for the tragic events unfolded. On April 11, 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold created REB's tape, one of the basement tapes marked as evidence item number 298. In this recording, they discussed their plans and anticipated impact, expressing regret for the distress it would cause their families while remaining resolute in their two-man war against everyone else. On the evening of April 17, 1999, Columbine High School hosted its prom. Dylan Klebold attended the event with Robin Anderson, projecting a positive outlook for his future. In contrast, Eric Harris spent the evening with Susan DeWitt, a girl he had recently met at Blackjack Pizza. They watched movies together at Eric's house, and although Eric invited Susan to join him at the after-prom party, she declined and returned home while Eric went to meet his friends at the party. On the morning of April 19, 1999, Eric and Dylan filmed a video for the school's morning broadcast, depicting them driving to Burger King with friends. They then skipped classes, opting to spend time outside of school. A neighbor reported hearing explosive sounds coming from the Harris garage on that same day. Dylan Klebold penned about 8 pages in his notebook, detailing plans for the upcoming events. One entry mentioned a countdown to judgment, setting bombs and car bombs to go off at specific times. Dylan wrote philosophically about life and death, expressing a sense of detachment and triviality towards existence. Meanwhile, Eric Harris asked Mark Manys to purchase ammunition on his behalf, despite being legally able to buy it himself. Mark acquired 100 rounds from a local Kmart for $25 and gave them to Eric later that night. When Mark inquired if Eric planned to use the ammo for target practice, Eric stated that he needed it for the following day. And then, on April 20th, tragedy struck. Given the abundance of resources available on the Columbine shooting, I have opted not to delve into the tragic events in detail. Even after 25 years, the haunting echoes of the 911 call, the chilling images of bodies outside the school, and the brutality of the attack remain vivid in our collective memory. The imagery of the massacre retains its raw violence, serving as an open wound in the American collective psyche. Columbine stands out as one of the earliest highly publicized school tragedies. Throughout that day, television and radio channels broadcasted live the students' desperate calls to their families, the movements of law enforcement, and the shocked expressions of survivors. This tragedy sparked a documentary, Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine in 2002, a film, Gus Van Sant's Elephant, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 2003, and numerous books. Additionally, there have been countless documentaries, videos, blog posts, articles, and reports meticulously crafted by various people, including Reddit users, investigators, and YouTube creators, further exploring the impact and aftermath of this devastating event. My intent is simply to honor the memory of those lost on that tragic day. Out of deep respect for their families, I refrain from mentioning their names, urging instead that we collectively hold them in our hearts, our brothers, our sisters, our family. The realization that most of these individuals had their whole lives and dreams ahead of them is profoundly sorrowful. When I think of their families, my heart breaks anew. The magnitude of their pain remains unimaginable to me. The lives lost were filled with potential and promise, tragically cut short by an incomprehensible act of violence. It is our duty to remember, to reflect, and to honor them. Therefore, I choose not to dwell on those who have spoken insensitively about this tragedy or engage in debates about organizations like the NRA. I also consider the anguish of the Klebold and Harris families. To live each day with the knowledge that their inaction and ignorance contributed to the deaths of 13 others must be an unbearable burden, especially as each anniversary of Columbine approaches. I read Sue Klebold's book, A Mother's Reckoning, seeking insight into her perspective. While at times it seemed to paint Dylan as the lesser of two evils, the painful reality remains: Dylan took the lives of his schoolmates. Yet, I empathize with Sue Klebold. I feel her pain and her shame, and I acknowledge her efforts in mental health activism. I didn't grow up in America, and during the Columbine tragedy, I realized that my perception of America was largely shaped by what I saw on screen. As a young teenager, I came to understand that Hollywood does not portray an accurate representation of America. Columbine served as a profound wake-up call for me on issues like gun control, and it opened my eyes to the harsh realities of racism, classism, bullying, and other topics that are now openly discussed. There are no easy solutions to the epidemic of school and mass shootings, despite the desire for a straightforward answer among Americans. I still struggle to comprehend how one can live in a country where the looming possibility of a Columbine-like tragedy persists, especially considering that over 370,000 students have faced gun violence in schools since Columbine. Real change will only occur through a comprehensive approach. Our research and reporting have highlighted 4 critical interconnected issues contributing to this uniquely American problem: the role of media, gun laws, school security, and mental health. It's time to do better.